There are 27 agents in Valorant as of March 2025. With 4 abilities each, that gives us a total of 108 abilities. But how many are there really? There are a lot of abilities that are extremely similar, and some which are basically identical. Today, I want to show you that there are really only 9 types of abilities in Valorant. Alright, so starting out we have the 4 more traditional categories of utility. These are smokes, walls, flashes, and mollies. All 4 of these can be found in most FPS games, and players have a pretty clear idea of what fits these categories. Let's start with smokes. There are 9 total smokes, and 7 of these are orb smokes. These are Astra's Nebula, Brim's Sky Smoke, Clove's Ruse, Harbor's Cove, Jet's Cloudburst, Omen's Dark Cover, and Viper's Poison Cloud. The other 2 smokes are Cypher's Cyber Cage and Viper's Ult. Cypher's cages aren't orb-shaped, but they are used in the same way as orb smokes a lot of the time, and Viper's Pit is just a giant smoke that covers a large area. Our second category is walls. There are 10 of these, and they can be placed on a Venn diagram to represent whether they block vision, movement, or both. The walls that only block vision and not movement are Astra's Cosmic Divide, Harbor's Cascade, Harbor's High Tide, ISO's Contingency, Neon's Fastlane, Phoenix's Blaze, and Viper's Toxic Screen. There's currently only one wall that only blocks movement, which would be Deadlock's Barrier Mesh. Both Sage's Barrier Orb and Visor's Shear block both vision and movement. Notably, both Harbor's Cascades and ISO's Contingency move forward after being deployed, which is unique to these 2 abilities. Next up is probably the easiest category, which is flashes. Flashes are just something that temporarily block your vision. There are 9 flashes total in Valorant. These are Breach's Flashpoint, Gekko's Dizzy, KO's Flash Drive, Omen's Paranoia, Phoenix's Curveball, Reyna's Leer, Sky's Guiding Light, Vize's Arc Rose, and who the fuck has Blindside? And Yoru's Blindside. Some people will argue that Omen's Paranoia and Reyna's Leer can't be called flashes and they should be called blinds instead, but honestly those people are just being pedantic, and if you care so much, just call this category blinds instead of flashes. Moving on, our last of the traditional 4 categories is mollies. And this is the first category where I'm going to have to ask you to start thinking outside of the box. For our purposes, mollies are just something that does damage in an area that requires the enemies to move or take damage. Now, there are 6 mollies that fit a sort of traditional definition of molly. These would be Brim's Incendiary, Gekko's Mosh Pit, KO's Fragment, KJ's Nanoswarms, Phoenix's Hot Hands, and Viper's Snakebite. If you use our looser definition of molly, we can then include Breach's Aftershock, Brim's Orbital Strike, Raze's Paint Shells, Sova's Shock Bolt, Taeho's Guided Salvo and Armageddon, and Vize's Razor Vine. And again, the thing grouping these things together is the fact that they do damage in a predefined area. So that's it for the 4 normal or more traditional categories. And our first, less traditional category is movement. There are 12 total movement abilities, which can be subcategorized into teleports and boosts. There are 5 total teleports: Chamber's Rendezvous, Omen's Shrouded Step, Omen's From the Shadows, Waylay's Refract, and Yoru's Gatecrash. The thing all 5 of these abilities have in common is that you simply press a key and are transported to your target destination. With Refract, this happens over time, and with the other 4, it happens instantaneously. Moving over to the boosts, all 7 of these give the player a speed boost, or assist in movement in some other way. These are Jet's Updraft and Tailwind, Neon's High Gear, Raze's Blast Pack, Reyna's Dismiss, Waylay's Light Speed, and Yoru's Dimensional Drift. 9 of the 12 movement abilities are on duelists, with most also being on the dive duelists, with the notable exception of Omen, who has 2 movement abilities, despite being a controller. Next up after movement we have our smallest category, which is passive info. These are things that you place down and you don't have to think about again. They're all set off by enemy proximity. There are 5 of these abilities: Chamber's Trademark, Cypher's Trapwire, Deadlock's Sonic Sensor, and KJ's Alarm Bot and Turret. Notably, while we talked about Shear earlier in the wall category, Shear could also easily be in this category because it fits the definition for passive info. And this is where I'd like to talk about the fact that these category definitions aren't rigid. You might disagree where I've put an ability or 2 throughout this video, and that's completely fine. Alright, the counterpart to passive info is active info. There are 3 subcategories to active info, which are control drones, autonomous drones, and scans. Control drones are something the player can possess and will take player input. These are Cypher's Spycam, Fade's Prowler, Sky's Trailblazer, Sova's Owl Drone, and Taeho's Stealth Drone. Contrary to control drones, autonomous drones don't require player input. The player simply deploys them and they act on their own. The 4 autonomous drones are Gekko's Wingman, Raze's Boombot, Sky's Seekers, and Yoru's Fakeout. Scans are something that scan an area, or the entire map, to reveal enemy locations. The 4 scans are Cypher's Neural Theft, Fade's Haunt, KO's Zero Point, and Sova's Recon Bolt. So the thing that holds this category together and differentiates it from passive info is timing. With all of these abilities, the agent that uses them controls the timing, and consequently controls when the info is gained. On the other hand, passive info gives a little bit of information continuously, in that a space is clear, and then a lot of information all at once an enemy is detected. The last two categories are debuffs and buffs, and I will admit these categories are extremely broad. It is much more useful to talk about these categories in their subcategories. So the three subcategories of debuffs are stuns, pulls and slows, and detains. Stuns are abilities that apply a negative status effect to the player instead of damaging them. There are several different negative status effects in the game. There's Concuss, there's Vulnerable, there's the new one with Waylay called Hinder, and while the actual status effect might be different, all stuns serve the same purpose: make the enemies easier to kill. There are 12 stuns in the game: Astra's Nova Pulse, Breach's Faultline and Rolling Thunder, Clove's Metal, Fade's Nightfall, Harbor's Reckoning, Iso's Undercut, Neon's Relay Bolt, Tejo's Special Delivery, Vize's Steel Garden, and Waylay's Saturate and Convergent Paths. Pulls and slows are abilities that are designed to slow or even prevent enemy movement. There are 4 of these, which are Astra's Gravity Well, Deadlock's Gravnet, Fade's Seize, and Sage's Slow Orb. And once again, I have to say the line between stuns and pulls and slows is kind of arbitrary. Both the Concuss and Hinder status effects slow you down significantly, so really a lot of the stuns could also be looked at as slows as well. The last debuff category is detains. These 3 abilities all prevent movement entirely. These are Deadlock's Annihilation, Gecko's Thrash, and KJ's Lockdown. Moving on from debuffs, we got our last category, which is buffs. Now, just like debuffs, this category is mostly talked about in its subcategories, which are heals, overheals, and shields, extra lives, unique weapons, and miscellaneous. The 5 heals, overheals, and shields are Clove's Pick Me Up, Iso's Double Tap, Reyna's Devour, Sage's Healing Orb, and Sky's Regrowth. All of these abilities give the player or their teammates additional health or shields. The 4 extra lives are Clove's Not Dead Yet, KO's Null Command, Phoenix's Run It Back, and Sage's Resurrection. All 4 of these abilities just give that player or someone on their team an extra life to play with. The next subcategory, with 6 abilities, is unique weapons. These are Chamber's Headhunter and Tour de Force, Jet's Bladestorm, Neon's Overdrive, Raze's Showstopper, and Sova's Hunter's Fury. 5 of these 6 abilities are ultimate abilities because they give the player a really powerful weapon that can define rounds. Finally, the last 3 abilities we need to talk about are Brim's Stim Beacon, Iso's Kill Contract, and Reyna's Empress. These don't really fit nice in any of the other subcategories here, or any of the other categories in general, but all 3 of these abilities do give the player or their team a buff. The Valorant wiki actually puts Iso's Kill Contract in a category of its own called Banish, which I find incredibly funny. And that's it. That's all 108 abilities in 9 different categories. Although I would argue what I defined as active info, debuffs, and buffs are easier talked about in their subcategories, which would give us 16 different types of abilities, which still isn't that many. But like I said earlier, these definitions aren't perfect, and not every ability fits neatly into one of these categories. Like for example, when I started making these graphics about 2 weeks ago, I put Vize's Razorvine as an untraditional molly, but if I was starting from scratch, I'd probably put it as a pull slow debuff, because even though it does damage if you move around in it, most people just stand still in it anyways, and treat it like a Deadlock Gravnet. So what is the whole point? Why did I just read 108 abilities at you over the course of 8 minutes? Well, now we have a really useful chart. Like just at a glance, you can see all the different types of agents, and it's kind of cool just to look at it. We can also use this chart to start talking about trends. Like for example, if I had this chart 2 weeks ago when I made my controller video, I could have pointed out that the 2 best smoke agents right now, Clove and Brimstone, only have 1 smoker wall, and have 3 supportive abilities, whereas the worst smokes right now, Harbor and Viper, both have 3 smokes and walls. And the other thing is, a lot of people were being overly critical of Waylay for being too similar to other agents. I was included in this, I'm not trying to absolve myself, but if we look at this chart, we can see that she's very different from everyone else. Like if you try to compare her to Jet, sure they both have 2 movement abilities, but Waylay has 2 stuns and Jet has a smoke and a unique weapon. So now we should check if any 2 agents have the same 4 ability categories, because then those 2 agents must be super similar, right? Oh cool, 2 agents do have the same 4 categories, so let's see how similar they are. Who are they? They are Iso and Sage? Wait, what?